Ethan Brooks sat alone in the quiet classroom, the words, "Why Harvard Needs Me," boldly crowning his essay. Outside these walls, his mother mopped hospital floors to keep their lights on. Inside, his dreams reached beyond their circumstances. When Miss S. Grayson spotted the essay, her laughter sliced the air. "Harvard, know your place," she sneered, ensuring the remaining students heard. Tyler and Noah, sons of wealth and privilege, joined her mockery. They expected shame from this 16-year-old black boy from the wrong side of town. Instead, they got quiet dignity as Ethan packed his work and walked away. None of them could possibly imagine that, in just weeks, a Harvard dean would walk through their doors, asking for Ethan by name. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the classroom windows, turning the ordinary high school space into something almost magical. Most students had long since fled the building, eager to escape into freedom, but 16-year-old Ethan Brooks remained, hunched over his desk, pen moving steadily across paper. His dark brown eyes narrowed in concentration as he carefully crafted each sentence, occasionally pausing to glance at the scattered reference books beside him. "Why Harvard Needs Me." Read the heading at the top of his paper. The title stood bold against the white background, a declaration of ambition that seemed to glow with purpose. Ethan didn't notice Miss S. Grayson enter the classroom. She moved quietly, her heels making little sound on the worn linoleum floor. She observed him for several seconds, noting his complete absorption in his work. Only 3 other students remained in the classroom's far corner, finishing makeup assignments. My, what has you so engaged? Mr. Brooks. Miss S. Grayson's voice cut through the silence, making Ethan jump slightly. He looked up, momentarily disoriented by the interruption. "Just working on an essay." Miss S. Grayson. She approached his desk, curiosity evident in her narrowed eyes. Without asking permission, she tilted her head to read his paper's title. Her eyebrows rose dramatically, and something shifted in her expression, the mild interest transforming into thinly veiled mockery. Harvard. The word hung in the air between them, inflected with such disbelief that it might as well have been a laugh. Harvard. Ethan, be realistic. The 3 students in the back of the room stopped their work. One of them, Tyler Evans, nudged his friend Noah Carter and snickered. Both boys came from the wealthiest families in the district, their designer clothes and easy confidence setting them apart from most students. "Miss S. Grayson," Tyler called out, his voice carrying across the room. "Maybe Ethan thinks they need more people to clean the dorms." His perfectly white teeth flashed in a cruel smile. Noah joined in, emboldened. "Yeah, I hear McDonald's is hiring too. Might be a more realistic career path than Harvard." Laughter filled the room, echoing off the walls. Ethan felt heat rise from his neck to his face, but kept his expression carefully neutral. He'd perfected this mask over years of similar moments, the art of appearing unbothered when everything inside him burned. "I'm just exploring options," Ethan said quietly, beginning to gather his papers. His movements were deliberate, dignified. Even as his hands betrayed the slightest tremor, Miss S. Grayson made no effort to stop the mockery. Instead, her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It's good to have dreams, Ethan, but there's a line between ambition and delusion. Perhaps focus on community college first." Ethan slipped his essay into his worn backpack, zipped it closed, and stood. "Thank you for your advice, Miss S. Grayson." His voice remained steady, giving nothing away as he walked toward the door. Tyler extended his foot, nearly tripping him. Ethan sidestepped it smoothly. He'd seen that move too many times before. Harvard material right there. Noah jeered, but Ethan was already through the door, his back straight, his pace unhurried until he was safely in the empty hallway. Only then did his shoulders slump just slightly, before he straightened them again and continued walking. 5 miles away at Mercy General Hospital, Abigail Brooks pushed her cleaning cart down a sterile corridor. Her hospital uniform was crisp, despite being 8 hours into her shift. At 42, Abigail's face showed the gentle lines of a woman who smiled, often despite life's hardships, who found joy in small victories and refused to be broken by setbacks. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Glancing around to make sure no supervisors were nearby, She quickly checked the message from Ethan. Rough day. Just 2 words, but they carried a weight only a mother could fully understand. Abigail frowned, pausing in her work. After 16 years of raising Ethan alone, she could read volumes in his brief texts. This wasn't ordinary teenage drama, something had hurt him today. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and continued working, but her mind stayed with her son. During her break, she retreated to the staff lounge and pulled out her wallet. Hidden behind her ID was an old, creased photograph of a handsome young black man wearing a Harvard sweatshirt, his smile wide and confident. James Brooks had died before their son was old enough to remember him, but sometimes Abigail saw flashes of him in Ethan, especially in that quiet determination that both father and son shared. She ran her thumb gently over the photograph before tucking it away again. There were secrets there, stories untold, but some truths waited for their proper time. The autumn afternoon had faded into evening by the time Ethan walked home. His route took him through neighborhoods that grew progressively rougher, past corner stores with security bars on their windows, apartment buildings with peeling paint, and the occasional group of men eyeing passers-by with suspicion. Ethan knew how to move through these spaces, confident enough not to appear weak, humble enough not to seem challenging. He stopped at the local library, a small branch with limited hours, but a librarian who knew him by name, cutting it close to day. "Ethan," Mrs. Werner said, glancing at the clock showing just 15 minutes until closing time. "Sorry, just need to print something for tomorrow." He slid into an empty computer station and quickly pulled up a draft of his essay from his email. The printer hummed to life, spitting out 3 pages that Ethan studied carefully before folding and placing in his backpack. By the time he arrived home, a small but tidy apartment in a building that had seen better days, his mother had already texted that she was working a double shift. Ethan made himself a sandwich, settled at their small kitchen table, and pulled out his homework. The Harvard essay he placed aside, something about it now tainted by the afternoon's humiliation. Later that night, long after the school hallways had emptied of students, Mr. Langston, the elderly school janitor, pushed his cleaning cart past Mrs. Grayson's classroom. His weathered hands guided the mop across the floor with practiced efficiency, his movements belying his 70-plus years. He paused when he noticed a crumpled paper in the trash can nearest Ethan's desk. Something about the way it had been discarded forcefully, angrily, caught his attention. Glancing around to ensure he was alone, Mr. Langston retrieved the paper and carefully smoothed it out. "Why Harvard needs me," he read, his thick glasses sliding down his nose as he bent closer to the page. As he read further, his eyes widened. The writing was remarkable, passionate, articulate, with the raw honesty that comes from lived experience rather than practiced privilege. This wasn't the work of a student parroting expectations. This was the voice of someone with something genuine to say. Mr. Langston folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered to the empty classroom. The next day, Mrs. Grayson stood before her advanced English class with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Students shifted uncomfortably as her gaze swept over them, lingering just a moment longer on Ethan. "Today, I'm announcing a special extra credit assignment," she announced, writing on the whiteboard with precise strokes. "You will each write a Harvard application essay." A few confused glances were exchanged around the room. Ethan kept his eyes down, focused on his notebook, feeling the weight of stares from classmates who had either witnessed or heard about yesterday's interaction. "As we've discussed, Harvard represents the pinnacle of academic achievement," Mrs. Grayson continued. "This exercise will help you understand the level of excellence required for such institutions. Perhaps it will even give some of you," her eyes flicked toward Ethan, "a more realistic perspective on your future paths." The assignment wasn't subtle. It was a pointed message, a public undermining thinly disguised as education. Ethan felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up his neck again, but he refused to give her the satisfaction of showing it. "Will this be graded on a curve, Mrs. Grayson?" Tyler asked, smirking in Ethan's direction. "Quality always stands out, Mr. Evans," she replied, "just like mediocrity." After class, Ethan hurried to his locker, eager to escape further attention. Mia Thompson, a quiet girl who usually sat at the back of the classroom, approached him hesitantly. With her worn clothes and guarded expression, she seemed to share his outsider status. though they'd rarely spoken. "That was messed up," she said simply, her voice low. Ethan glanced at her, surprised by the unexpected alliance. "Just another day in paradise," he replied with a shrug that aimed for nonchalance. "You're actually going to do it though, right? The essay?" "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I'm not going to let her win." Mia nodded, a flicker of something like respect in her eyes before she disappeared into the hallway crowd. That night, Ethan sat at the rickety kitchen table, papers spread around him as he worked on revising his essay. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional drip from the leaky bathroom faucet and distant sirens from the street below. In the bedroom, Abigail Brooks carefully wrapped her mother's gold bracelet in a soft cloth. It was one of the few valuable things she owned, a family heirloom that had survived generations. She tucked it into her purse, steadying herself against the wave of regret that threatened to overwhelm her. It wasn't the first sacrifice she'd made for Ethan, and it wouldn't be the last. The next day, while Ethan was at school, Abigail visited 3 pawn shops before finding one that offered a fair price for the bracelet. That evening, she presented Ethan with a second-hand laptop, not the newest model, but functional, with a working battery and enough memory to handle his schoolwork. "Mom, how did you?" Ethan's question trailed off as he recognized the determined set of her jaw. He knew that look, the one that said, "Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. You need it for school," she said simply. "And for Harvard applications." Ethan's eyes widened. "You heard about that." "I hear everything eventually," she replied with a small smile. "Now you make that computer and its keep for the next week." Ethan worked relentlessly on his essay. He rose earlier, stayed up later, and spent his lunch periods in the library, researching successful Harvard applicants. The borrowed laptop became his constant companion, its keys growing familiar under his fingertips as he crafted and refined his words. On the day the assignments were due, Ethan arrived early to print his final draft in the school library. The printer hummed as it produced the 5 perfectly formatted pages. He read through it one last time, satisfaction warming his chest. Whatever Miss S. Grayson's intentions, she had pushed him to create something he was genuinely proud of. What he didn't notice was Tyler standing nearby, watching with calculated interest. As soon as Ethan left for his first class, Tyler approached the printer, where an extra copy of Ethan's essay remained in the tray. Forgotten in Ethan's hurry. "Check this out," Tyler said to Noah between classes, showing him Ethan's essay. Little Harvard hopeful left this behind. Noah scanned the pages, his eyebrows rising. "This is actually good." "Too good," Tyler replied, a plan already forming. Way too good for someone like him. During lunch period, while most students were in the cafeteria, Tyler and Noah accessed one of the computer lab terminals. Within minutes, they had copied sections of Ethan's essay into a document and placed it in a folder labeled Ethan Sources on the school's shared drive, a space teachers could access. "Now we just need to make sure Grayson finds it," Tyler said, closing the file with a satisfied smile. "Anonymous tip," Noah suggested. "Perfect." The next day, Ethan was called to Principal Hayes' office during third period. As he walked the long hallway, curious eyes followed him, and whispers trailed in his wake. Something had happened, but he had no idea what. Principal Hayes was a tall, austere man who ran the school with detached efficiency. His office was impersonal, no family photos, few decorations, nothing to suggest the human behind the administrator. When Ethan entered, Miss S. Grayson was already there, her expression a mixture of triumph and manufactured concern. "Sit down, Mr. Brooks," Principal Hayes said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Ethan sat, his heart rate accelerating despite his efforts to remain calm. "Do you know why you're here?" the principal asked. "No, oh sir." Principal Hayes slid several papers across the desk, Ethan's essay, alongside printouts of academic articles and essays from Harvard's website. Certain passages were highlighted in both documents, showing undeniable similarities. "Can you explain this?" the principal asked, his voice neutral, but his eyes already conveying judgment. Ethan stared at the papers in shock. "I don't understand. I wrote this, all of it." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Miss S. Grayson interjected. "These passages are nearly identical to published works." "That's not possible," Ethan Don insisted, his voice rising slightly. "I've been working on this for weeks. I have drafts, notes, manufactured after the fact, perhaps, Miss S. Grayson suggested. Principal Hayes studied Ethan with disappointed eyes. Plagiarism is a serious offense, Mr. Brooks, one that could effectively end any Ivy League aspirations. The injustice of the situation threatened to overwhelm Ethan. He gripped the edges of his chair, forcing himself to breathe steadily. I did not plagiarize anything. Someone is setting me up. A convenient excuse, Miss S. Grayson said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Langston stood in the doorway, his janitor's uniform slightly rumpled, but his expression resolute. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said, his gravelly voice filling the room, but I couldn't help overhearing. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about Ethan's work." Principal Hayes frowned at the interruption. "This is a private disciplinary meeting, Mr. Langston." The elderly janitor nodded but stepped fully into the office anyway. "I understand that, sir. But I've seen Ethan working on that essay for weeks now, late evenings, early mornings, in the library during lunch. I've emptied enough trash cans with his discarded drafts to know he wrote every word himself." The unexpected defense left everyone momentarily speechless. Miss S. Grayson recovered first, her voice sharp with irritation. "With all due respect, how would you know what constitutes original work at the Harvard level?" Mr. Langston simply smiled, the gesture transforming his weathered face. "I read Miss S. Grayson quite extensively, actually." Principal Hayes cleared his throat. "While I appreciate your input, Mr. Langston, we have evidence that suggests academic dishonesty. Evidence that appeared rather suddenly, I imagine," Mr. Langston replied. "Perhaps you might want to check when those source files were created in the system." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Principal Hayes's face. He tapped briefly at his computer, examining something on the screen. After a moment, his expression changed subtly. "It seems the files in question were created only yesterday," he admitted reluctantly. "That doesn't prove innocence, but it does raise questions." Miss S. Grayson's face tightened with displeasure. "You can't possibly be taking the word of a janitor over documented evidence. Evidence that may have been fabricated," Principal Hayes replied, his tone cooling. He turned to Ethan. "In light of this uncertainty, you will be placed on probation rather than suspended. Any further incident of questionable academic integrity will result in severe consequences. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, relief washing through him even as anger simmered beneath. "Yes, sir. Thank you." As they left the office, Mr. Langston fell into step beside Ethan. "Keep your head up, son. Some people fear what they don't understand, and some fear those who might outshine them." Before Ethan could respond, the older man disappeared down a side hallway, his mop bucket squeaking slightly as he went. That evening, Abigail Brooks stood outside Miss S. Grayson's classroom. Her hospital uniform had been exchanged for clean jeans and a simple blouse. She'd taken time off between shifts, precious hours she couldn't truly spare to address the situation her son had described. Miss S. Grayson looked up from her desk, surprise quickly masked by professional detachment. "Can I help you? I'm Abigail Brooks, Ethan's mother." Recognition flashed across the teacher's face. "Ah, yes, please come in." Abigail entered, declining the offered seat. She preferred to stand, to maintain whatever small advantage her height might provide. "I want to discuss what happened with my son's essay, Miss S. Brooks. I understand your concern, but academic integrity is non-negotiable at this institution." "Integrity works both ways," Abigail replied evenly. "My son has never cheated a day in his life. He's worked harder than most to overcome the obstacles placed in his path, some of them by teachers who decided what he was capable of before giving him a chance." Miss S. Grayson's expression hardened. "I assess all students by the same standards. Do you?" Abigail challenged. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're holding some to a higher standard, just to watch them fail." "I'm sorry you feel that way." Miss S. Grayson's voice cooled several degrees. "Perhaps if you spent more time overseeing his academic work instead of other activities, these situations wouldn't arise." The implication hung in the air, a judgment about Abigail's long working hours, her absence during homework time, her position cleaning floors rather than helping with calculus. Abigail's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, a controlled fire that suggested deeper reserves of strength than the teacher had anticipated. "My son will succeed despite people like you, Miss S. Grayson, not because of you." She turned to leave. then paused at the door. And when he does, I hope you remember this conversation. The following day, Mia approached Ethan at his locker. Her usual guardedness had softened slightly, replaced by something like resolve. I saw what happened, she said without preamble. Tyler and Noah, they took your essay from the printer. Ethan's eyes widened. You saw them, she nodded. I was in the library alcove, reading. They didn't notice me. Would you tell Principal Hayes? Hope colored his voice. Mia hesitated, fear briefly shadowing her face. I can't get involved like that. I'm sorry, but I wanted you to know you're not crazy. They set you up. Before Ethan could press further, she slipped back into the crowd of students, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself invisible. That afternoon, Mr. Langston found Ethan sitting alone on the school steps, waiting for the city bus. Mind if I join you? The janitor asked, lowering himself carefully onto the step beside Ethan. Free country, Ethan replied with a shrug. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before Mr. Langston spoke again. You know, I spent some time in Boston many years ago. Yeah, beautiful city, terrible winters, but the university's there now. That was something special. His eyes took on a distant look. Places like Harvard, they're not just buildings and books, they're ideas, possibilities. Ethan glanced at him curiously. Did you go to college there? Mr. Langston smiled enigmatically. Let's just say I spent my fair share of time around those hallowed halls. He patted Ethan's shoulder as he stood. Don't let anyone dim your light, son. The world has enough darkness already. As Mr. Langston walked back into the school, Ethan noticed a strange air of dignity about the old janitor, something that transcended his worn uniform and calloused hands. Later that night, well after the school had emptied, Mr. Langston made his way to a storage room in the basement. Using a key from the large ring at his belt, he unlocked a door that few at the school even knew existed. Inside, among dusty sports equipment and outdated textbooks, stood a large wooden crate. Mr. Langston pulled the chain on a bare bulb overhead, illuminating the space in harsh yellow light. He brushed away years of dust from the crate's lid, revealing a label that read Harvard alumni, Malcolm Rivers. His fingers traced the name almost reverently before he opened the lid and began searching through the contents with careful purpose. Found you, he murmured, lifting out a thick folder. Just what the boy needs. The early morning light filtered through the library windows, casting a golden glow across the worn tables. Ethan sat across from Mr. Langston, their voices hushed in the empty space. They had begun meeting here 3 mornings a week, arriving before most teachers had even pulled into the parking lot. Rhetoric is about more than fancy words, Mr. Langston explained, sliding a dog-eared book toward Ethan. It's about understanding how language moves people, how it can change minds or harden hearts. Ethan ran his fingers over the book's cover, elements of argument, a text, and reader. It looked college level, far more advanced than anything they studied in Miss S. Grayson's class. You think I can understand this stuff? Ethan asked. Mr. Langston's weathered face creased with a smile. Son, I've been watching you for months. You already understand it better than most. You just need the vocabulary to name what you're doing. These morning sessions became a ritual. Mr. Langston would share books that seemed to appear from nowhere, guiding Ethan through concepts that stretched his mind in new directions. They discussed logical fallacies, studied great speeches, and practiced techniques for building persuasive arguments. Where did you learn all this? Ethan asked one morning as Mr. Langston dissected the structure of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. The janitor's eyes twinkled. Let's just say I've had time to read and listen. And sometimes the most important education happens outside classrooms. As winter deepened, Ethan's skills grew. He began seeing patterns in arguments, identifying weaknesses in reasoning that he'd previously missed. The quiet confidence in his writing expanded to his speech. Even when he remained silent in class, which was often, given Miss S. Grayson's continued coolness toward him. His mind worked differently now, analyzing, evaluating, preparing. One evening, in late January, Ethan sat at the kitchen table reviewing his calculus homework when Abigail returned from her shift. She looked tired but determined as she set her purse down and joined him. I've been meaning to show you something, she said, pulling an old photo album from the shelf beside their small television. She flipped through several pages before stopping at a faded photograph of a young man in graduation attire. Is that Dad? Ethan asked, leaning closer. Abigail nodded. Your father's high school graduation. He was valedictorian. She turned another page to reveal a letter on official-looking stationery, and this was his acceptance letter to State University. Ethan studied the letter, confusion evident on his face. I thought, didn't he go to Harvard? You have that picture of him in a Harvard sweater. Abigail's fingers traced the edges of the acceptance letter. He never made it to Harvard. Ethan. Not as a student. He had a full scholarship to State, but what he really wanted was Harvard. He planned to transfer after his first year. Her voice grew soft. He was brilliant, smarter than anyone I've ever known, but life doesn't always follow our plans. What happened? Ethan asked, though part of him already knew the answer. I got pregnant with you, Abigail said, simply. And he chose us. He chose family over Harvard, worked 2 jobs while taking night classes at State. He never complained, not once. She looked directly into Ethan's eyes, but he never gave up that dream either. He used to say he was just delaying it, not abandoning it, and then he died. Ethan said quietly. Abigail nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Car accident when you were 2. But I want you to know he would be so proud of you, not just for dreaming about Harvard, but for fighting for it when it would be easier to give up. Ethan absorbed this information in silence, a new understanding of his father, taking shape, not just a distant memory or an idealized figure, but a real man who had faced difficult choices and made sacrifices. Why didn't you tell me this before? He finally asked. Abigail closed the album gently. Some things you need to discover in your own time, in your own way, and maybe I needed to wait until you were ready to carry this story forward. The next day at school, Mia approached Ethan between classes, something urgent in her expression. Have you heard about the citywide essay competition? She asked without preamble. Ethan shook his head. With everything happening, he hadn't been paying attention to announcements. It's sponsored by the University Alliance Foundation. The final judging panel includes representatives from Ivy League schools, including Harvard. Her voice dropped lower. The winner gets a scholarship and automatic consideration from the schools on the panel. Ethan's heart rate quickened. When is it? Applications are due next week. The competition itself is in 6 weeks. She hesitated before adding, You should enter. Your writing is really good. Before Ethan could respond, she handed him a folded flyer and disappeared into the crowded hallway, leaving him to wonder how she knew about his writing abilities. That afternoon, Ethan approached Miss S. Peterson, the school's guidance counselor, about entering the competition. The kind-faced woman was reviewing the requirements when Miss S. Grayson appeared in the doorway. The Mallister essay competition. Miss S. Grayson's voice carried a note of surprise. I wasn't aware you were considering this, Ethan. Miss S. Peterson smiled, seemingly oblivious to the tension. I was just telling Ethan that our school can nominate 3 students. We currently have only 2, Tyler Evans and Tara Blackwell, the first C. Miss S. Grayson's lips pressed into a thin line. Unfortunately, school policy requires that students on academic probation cannot represent Westwood in external competitions. Academic probation. Mrs. Peterson looked confused. I don't recall seeing that in Ethan's file. It's recent, Mrs. Grayson explained smoothly. A regrettable plagiarism incident. I'm sure you understand we can't risk the school's reputation. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides, the unfairness of it burning in his chest. The plagiarism accusation was never proven, he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. And Principal Hayes only put me on probation as a precaution. Miss S. Peterson looked between them, clearly sensing the undercurrents. Perhaps we should consult with Principal Hayes directly. By all means, Miss S. Grayson replied, her confidence unwavering. Ethan sat across from Principal Hayes, who studied the competition paperwork with a furrowed brow. Miss S. Grayson has raised valid concerns, the principal said finally. However, there's nothing in our official policy that explicitly prohibits students on probationary status from participating in academic competitions. Relief flooded through Ethan, though he kept his expression neutral. That said, Principal Hayes continued, any further incident will result in your immediate disqualification. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Ethan replied. Then you may proceed with your application. As Ethan left the office, he found Mr. Langston waiting in the hallway, mop in hand, but clearly not engaged in cleaning. Good news, the janitor asked quietly. Ethan nodded. I can enter the competition. Then we'd better step up your training, son. Over the next few weeks, Ethan devoted every spare moment to preparing for the competition. After school, he began visiting the law library in the wealthy downtown district, where security guards initially eyed him with suspicion, until a kind librarian named Miss Winters took him under her wing. Argumentative writing techniques, she repeated when he first explained what he was looking for. That's not what most high school students research. Color me intrigued. She introduced him to resources he never would have found on his own journals, on rhetoric, books on persuasive communication, even access to archived speeches from historical figures. The world of formal argumentation opened before him, rich with possibilities. Meanwhile, Tyler and Noah watched Ethan's growing confidence with mounting frustration. Their usual taunts seemed to bounce off him now, and Miss S. Grayson's attempts to undermine him in class were increasingly met with respectful but firm responses that left her flustered. This essay competition, Tyler said to Noah as they lounged beside Tyler's new sports car after school. Brooks actually thinks he has a chance. So what? You're going to crush him anyway, Noah replied, scrolling through his phone. Tyler's eyes narrowed as he watched Ethan walk toward the city bus, his backpack heavy with books. Maybe, but why take chances? Remember Brad Thompson. He owes me after I helped him pass calculus last semester. What about him? He's working the sound and tech for the competition. I think we need to have a conversation about how he can help ensure Brooks's big moment goes sideways. Brad, a senior with more technical skills than academic ambition, was easily persuaded by the promise of concert tickets and social inclusion. The plan was simple, a technical glitch during Ethan's presentation that would throw him off his game at the crucial moment. Nothing too obvious, Tyler instructed, just enough to make him look unprepared, unprofessional, unaware of these machinations. Ethan continued his preparations. One afternoon, as he and Mr. Langston reviewed his practice speech in an empty classroom, the janitor interrupted him mid-sentence. "You're arguing from authority here," Mr. Langston said, "but your voice lacks conviction. You need to own these words, not just speak them." Ethan sighed in frustration. "I'm trying. Try this." Mr. Langston stood up straight, his stooped janitor's posture suddenly transforming. His voice, usually gravelly and quiet, resonated with unexpected power. "We are not merely the sum of our circumstances, but the product of our choices in the face of those circumstances." The shift was so dramatic that Ethan stared in amazement. "Where did that come from?" Mr. Langston smiled, resuming his usual demeanor. "A speech I gave once, a long time ago." "What kind of speech?" "Commencement address," Mr. Langston said casually, bending to pick up his cleaning rag. "Harvard University, class of '78. Ethan's jaw dropped. "You gave a commencement speech at Harvard. Were you a professor there?" The old man's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Not exactly. That's a story for another day." He patted Ethan's shoulder. "Point is, it's not about where you come from, son. It's about how you carry yourself when you get where you're going." As the competition approached, Abigail received a letter that left her visibly shaken. Ethan found her at the kitchen table one evening, staring at an envelope bearing the Harvard crest. "Mom, what's that?" she startled, quickly tucking the letter into her pocket. "Nothing important, just some mail." Her forced smile didn't reach her eyes. "How's the essay coming along?" Ethan let the obvious deflection pass, though his curiosity remained. Later that night, he heard her on the phone, speaking in hushed tones he couldn't quite make out. Whatever connection his mother had to Harvard, she wasn't ready to share it with him. The day before the competition, Mia sought out Ethan during lunch period. They had developed a cautious friendship over the past weeks, though she remained reserved about her personal life. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked, sitting beside him at his otherwise empty table. Ethan nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." "You coming to watch?" Mia hesitated. "I'll try. Things are complicated right now." Something in her voice prompted Ethan to look more closely at her. The dark circles under her eyes, the slightly unwashed appearance of her hair, the same clothes she'd worn yesterday. "Mia, is everything okay at home?" She stiffened. "Why wouldn't it be? Just asking. You seem tired lately." Mia stared at her untouched lunch for a long moment before speaking. "My mom lost her job 2 months ago. We got evicted last week." The simple statements hung in the air between them. "Where are you staying?" Ethan asked quietly. "The women's shelter on Monroe Street." She looked up, defiance in her eyes. "Don't you dare feel sorry for me." "I don't," Ethan replied honestly. "I admire you. You're still here, still trying. That takes guts." Something in Mia's expression softened. "Yeah, well, same goes for you. We make quite a pair." Huh. The future Harvard scholar and the homeless girl, regular high school success story. Despite the gravity of her situation, they both found themselves laughing. A brief moment of connection in the unlikeliest of circumstances. That night, Ethan put the finishing touches on his essay. Legacy is not inherited, it's created. Mr. Langston had helped him refine the central thesis that true legacy comes not from family names or financial inheritance, but from the impact of choices made in decisive moments. As he read through the final draft, Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd experienced before. Whatever happened tomorrow, he had created something meaningful, something true to his own voice. The Mallister essay competition was held at Riverside Convention Center, a gleaming glass structure in the wealthiest part of the city. Ethan felt distinctly out of place as he walked through the ornate lobby. All around him, students from private academies and prestigious public schools mingled confidently, many accompanied by parents in expensive business attire. Abigail had wanted desperately to attend, but her supervisor had denied her request for time off. "I'll be there in spirit," she'd promised that morning, pressing a small, smooth stone into his palm. "My father gave me this for luck. Now it's yours." Ethan clutched the stone in his pocket as he checked in at the registration table, receiving a name badge and participant packet. As he turned to find his assigned preparation room, he spotted Tyler and Noah across the lobby, surrounded by a group of similarly well-dressed students. "Well, look who it is," Tyler called out, loud enough to draw attention. "Westwood's charity case." Several of Tyler's new friends snickered, eyeing Ethan's simple button-down shirt and khakis, his best clothes. Freshly ironed but clearly not designer quality. "Good luck today, Brooks," Tyler continued, his smile razor-sharp. "You'll need it." Ethan merely nodded and continued walking, refusing to engage. Mr. Langston's advice echoed in his mind. The moment you let them pull you into their game, you've already lost. In the preparation room, Ethan reviewed his notes one last time. The competition format was straightforward. Each participant would deliver their essay as a speech, followed by questions from the judging panel. Scoring would be based on content, delivery, and ability to defend the ideas presented. As he waited for his turn, Ethan observed the other students. Most spoke confidently about family connections, prestigious internships, and extensive travel experiences. Their essays seemed built around these advantages, the special insights gained from senator parents or summers studying abroad. "Brooks, Ethan," a coordinator called. "You're up next. Please proceed to the staging area." Ethan gathered his materials and followed the coordinator to a small waiting area behind the main stage. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see the audience, mostly parents, teachers, and other students. To his surprise, he spotted Principal Hayes in the back row, arms crossed but attentive. Even more unexpected was the sight of Mr. Langston slipping quietly into a seat near the exit. The old janitor had traded his usual work clothes for a simple but dignified suit that transformed his appearance. Had Ethan passed him on the street, he might not have recognized him. 2 minutes, the stage manager informed him. On stage, a girl from Wellington Academy was finishing her presentation about sustainable architecture, inspired by her family's philanthropy in developing countries. Ethan took a deep breath, centering himself. He had prepared for this moment for weeks. His essay was memorized, his argument solid, his examples personal but universal. Next presenter, Ethan Brooks from Westwood High School. The announcer's voice rang out. Ethan walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily disorienting. He placed his printed essay on the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the audience. "Good afternoon," he began. "My essay is titled, 'Legacy is not inherited, it's created.'" He glanced down at his papers and froze. The pages were blank, complete. Pristine emptiness where his carefully crafted words should have been. A ripple of whispers spread through the audience. From the corner of his eye, Ethan spotted Tyler and Noah in the third row, barely containing their laughter. Nearby, a tech student, Brad, if he remembered correctly, avoided eye contact completely. The setup was clear now, somehow. They had replaced his printed essay with blank pages, expecting him to panic, to flee the stage in humiliation. 3 seconds passed. 4, 5. The head judge raised an eyebrow, pen poised over her evaluation sheet. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then straightened his shoulders and stepped away from the podium. "I apologize for the technical difficulty," he said, his voice steady. "But perhaps it's fitting for my topic. Sometimes life takes away your prepared script, and what matters is what you've internalized, what you truly believe, rather than what you've memorized." He moved to the center of the stage, abandoning the blank pages entirely. "Legacy is not inherited, it's created. This simple truth has shaped my life, though I didn't always have the words for it." The words began to flow, not exactly as written, but with a natural rhythm and authenticity that captured the essence of his essay. He spoke about his father's deferred Harvard dream without bitterness, but with determined purpose. He described education not as a birthright, but as a constantly renewable resource that gained value through use. "We often confuse privilege with potential," he continued, his confidence growing with each sentence. "We mistake accidents of birth for indicators of worth. But true legacy is built in the moments when we choose to transcend our circumstances rather than be defined by them." As he spoke, the audience's initial discomfort gave way to attentiveness. Principal Hayes uncrossed his arms, leaning forward slightly. Even some of the judges had stopped taking notes, simply listening. "I stand before you today, not because my path was clear or easy, but because it wasn't. Each obstacle forced a choice, to resign myself to limitations imposed by others or to find another way forward." In the back of the room, Mr. Langston nodded almost imperceptibly, pride evident in his weathered face. "The greatest legacy we can create is not a name that endures in buildings or endowments, but in the expanded possibility we leave for those who come after us. When we break through barriers, we create pathways. When we refuse to accept arbitrary limitations, we establish new precedents." Ethan concluded with a quote from his father's journal, words Mr. Langston had helped him discover and incorporate. "The dream is never about the destination. It's about proving you belong there all along." The silence that followed his final words hung in the air for several seconds before applause broke out, scattered at first, then building from his peripheral vision. Ethan could see Tyler and Noah exchanging confused glances, their planned humiliation having backfired completely. The lead judge, a distinguished woman with silver-streaked hair, leaned forward. "That was unexpected, Mr. Brooks, but quite effective. I'm curious, how do you respond to critics who might say that institutions like Harvard are designed to maintain certain social hierarchies, not dismantle them?" The question was challenging, perhaps deliberately so, but Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'd say they're partially right. Historically, these institutions have often reinforced existing power structures, but that's precisely why they need students who come from different backgrounds. True excellence doesn't emerge from homogeneity, but from the collision of diverse perspectives. Harvard doesn't need me because I fit a predetermined mold. They need me because I don't." The judge's expression remained neutral, but she nodded slowly before making a note on her evaluation form. After answering 3 more questions with similar poise, Ethan was dismissed from the stage. His legs felt slightly unsteady as he made his way back to the preparation room, the adrenaline beginning to subside. He had done it not perfectly, not exactly as planned, but perhaps better for the unexpected challenge. As participants waited for the judge's deliberations, Ethan found himself approached by one of the other contestants, a tall girl from Brookside Academy. "That was impressive," she said simply. "The blank pages thing, was that planned?" Ethan shook his head. "Sabotage, actually." Her eyebrows rose. "Seriously, that's messed up." "Well, you handled it like a pro. Thanks." A man in a tailored suit emerged from the judge's room, speaking quietly into his phone as he scanned the waiting area. "You need to meet this kid," Ethan overheard him say before he disappeared back into the room. An hour later, the finalists were announced. To absolutely no one's surprise, Ethan's name was among them, along with 4 others from various schools. The final rankings would be revealed the following week, but making the top 5 already guaranteed scholarship consideration. As the event concluded and people began to disperse, Ethan found himself face to face with Tyler and Noah in the lobby. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. "Congratulations," Tyler finally said, the word clearly tasting bitter in his mouth. "Thank you," Ethan replied evenly. "The blank pages that wasn't supposed to happen," Noah blurted out, earning a sharp glare from Tyler. "Shut up," Tyler hissed. Ethan studied them both for a moment. There were many things he could say: angry accusations, threats to report them, bitter complaints about the unfairness of their actions. Instead, he simply said, "I guess I should thank you. You taught me something important today." "What's that?" Tyler asked suspiciously. "That I'm stronger than your opinion of me." With that, Ethan walked past them toward the exit, where Mr. Langston waited. "You did good in there, son," the old janitor said, pride evident in his voice. "Real good. I almost lost it when I saw those blank pages," Ethan admitted. "But you didn't. That's what matters." Mr. Langston glanced back toward the convention center. "Sometimes the truest test isn't the one you prepare for. It's the one that catches you by surprise." As they walked to the bus stop, neither noticed Miss S. Grayson watching from her car across the street, her expression troubled. She had come to support Tyler, expecting to witness Ethan's humiliation. Instead, she had seen something that disturbed her, deeply echoes of a past she thought she had left behind. Reminders of her own buried history. In the shadows of the convention center's parking garage, another observer remained. The older black man in an impeccable suit had watched the entire competition with keen interest, particularly Ethan's unexpected triumph over sabotage. Dean Malcolm Rivers of Harvard University pulled out his phone and made a note in his calendar: follow up on Ethan Brooks' priority. The wheels of fate had begun turning in earnest. The morning sun cast long shadows across Westwood High's brick facade as students filtered through the main entrance. It was an ordinary Tuesday, by all appearances, except for the sleek black car parked in the visitor's spot, typically reserved for district officials. Principal Hayes stood at the front entrance, uncharacteristically fidgeting with his tie. Beside him, Vice Principal Dawson whispered urgently, gesturing toward the approaching figure. Dean Malcolm Rivers of Harvard University cut an impressive silhouette as he walked toward the school, tall, distinguished, with closely cropped gray hair and a perfectly tailored suit. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to commanding respect. At 63, he'd been a fixture at Harvard for nearly 3 decades, known for his brilliant legal mind and unwavering commitment to diversifying the institution. Principal Hayes. Dean Rivers extended his hand. "Thank you for accommodating my unexpected visit." Principal Hayes shook his hand with barely concealed nervousness. "It's an honor, Dean Rivers. We weren't aware Harvard was touring schools in our district." The dean smiled politely. "This isn't an official recruitment visit. I'm here on a more specific mission." The news of a Harvard dean's presence spread through the school with the speed only possible in the ecosystem of teenage communication. By second period, wild speculation dominated hallway conversations. Mrs. Grayson entered the teacher's lounge to find her colleagues huddled around the coffee pot, voices animated with excitement. "I heard he's here to announce a special scholarship program," Mr. Jenkins, the physics teacher, was saying. "More likely scouting for that Evans boy," replied Miss Tanner from the math department. "His father's donations could probably build a new library wing." Mrs. Grayson poured herself coffee with a satisfied smile. Of course, Dean Rivers would be interested in Tyler. The boy came from exactly the kind of family Harvard cultivated: wealthy, connected, legacy material. This was how the world worked. After all, he's in with Principal Hayes now, Mr. Jenkins continued. Apparently, he requested transcript reviews for our top candidates. Miss S. Grayson's smile broadened as she stirred cream into her coffee. She'd written Tyler, ascended into a grand conspiracy about how the essay was stolen by lizard people from Alpha Centauri. The classroom door opened, interrupting her advanced English class mid-discussion. Principal Hayes stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Miss S. Grayson, may I have a word?" She nodded, turning to her students. "Continue analyzing paragraph 3. I'll return shortly." In the hallway, Principal Hayes kept his voice low. "Dean Rivers from Harvard is in my office. He's requested to meet one of your students." "Miss S." Grayson's chest swelled with pride. "Of course, I can send Tyler down right away." "Not Tyler," Principal Hayes interrupted. "He's asking for Ethan Brooks." The words hit her like a physical blow. Ethan. There must be some mistake. No mistake. He was quite specific. Something in Principal Hayes's tone had changed, a new coolness. Perhaps even a hint of satisfaction at her obvious shock. But why would he? He didn't elaborate. Please send Ethan to my office immediately. As Principal Hayes walked away, Mrs. Grayson stood frozen, her carefully constructed worldview cracking beneath her feet. Inside the classroom, Ethan was focused on his textbook when Mrs. Grayson returned, her face tight with suppressed emotion. Ethan Brooks, she announced, each syllable precise. You're wanted in the principal's office. A chorus of oohs rippled through the classroom. What did Harvard boy do now? Tyler Stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Plagiarize another essay. Laughter followed, but it died quickly when Mrs. Grayson failed to even smile at the joke. Something in her demeanor silenced even Tyler. Bring your things, she instructed Ethan. You may not return to class. Ethan gathered his belongings. Confusion and a touch of apprehension clouding his features as he walked toward the door. Whispers followed him. He caught fragments. Harvard Dean, principal's office. In trouble again. The hallway seemed longer than usual as he made his way to the administrative wing. What could this be about? Had Tyler and Noah's confession about the sabotaged essay somehow reached the principal? Was this further fallout from the plagiarism accusation? Go right in, the secretary instructed when he arrived. They're waiting for you. They, the plural registered as Ethan knocked on the principal's door. Enter, came Principal Hayes's voice. Ethan stepped into the office and immediately froze. Principal Hayes sat behind his desk as expected, but the visitor's chair was occupied by a distinguished older black man in a suit that probably cost more than everything Ethan owned combined. Ethan, Principal Hayes said, his voice carrying an unusual warmth. I'd like you to meet Dean Malcolm Rivers from Harvard University. The dean rose, extending his hand. Ethan Brooks. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Ethan shook the offered hand, his mind racing to make sense of the situation. I thank you, sir. It's an honor. Please, sit down. Dean Rivers gestured to the second visitor's chair as Ethan sat. He noticed Principal Hayes watching him with newfound interest, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. I was at the Mallister competition, Dean Rivers began. Your performance was remarkable, particularly your recovery, when faced with what I now understand was deliberate sabotage. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. You know about that. Word gets around. The dean's smile was knowing. But that's not why I'm here. I've read your essays, both the official submission and earlier drafts. Earlier drafts, Ethan questioned. Then understanding dawned. Mr. Langston. Dean Rivers nodded. Gerald has always had an eye for exceptional talent. But even without his advocacy, your work would have caught my attention. You have a distinct voice. Ethan, authentic, thoughtful, and refreshingly original. The conversation felt surreal, a Harvard dean discussing his writing as if it actually mattered. As if he mattered. Thank you, sir. I'm here because Harvard has a special interest in students like you. Dean Rivers continued. Your father's influence still resonates in our community. The statement hung in the air, incomprehensible at first. My father, Ethan's voice faltered. I don't understand. Dean Rivers exchanged a glance with Principal Hayes, who looked equally confused. Your father was James Brooks, correct? Yes, but he never attended Harvard. He went to State University. My mum told me he wanted Harvard, but Ethan trailed off, increasingly bewildered. The dean's expression shifted suddenly. I see. Perhaps we should continue this conversation with your mother present. Is she available to join us? Principal Hayes intervened. Miss S. Brooks works at Mercy General Hospital. Their shifts are quite rigid. I understand. Actually, Ethan said, she has today off. She's probably at home. Would you be comfortable calling her? Dean Rivers asked. I believe she should be part of this discussion. 20 minutes later, Abigail Brooks arrived at the school, her expression a complex mixture of worry and something else Ethan couldn't quite identify. When she was shown into the principal's office and saw Dean Rivers, she stopped abruptly in the doorway. Malcolm, she said softly. The dean stood. It's been a long time. Abigail. The familiarity between them was unmistakable, leaving both Ethan and Principal Hayes staring in confusion. You two know each other? Ethan asked, looking between his mother and the Harvard dean. Abigail took a seat beside her son, her composure returning. We met through your father. Dean Rivers nodded. James Brooks was one of the most promising research assistants I ever mentored. We worked together on a medical ethics project, a collaboration between Harvard Law and medical schools. But Dad wasn't at Harvard, Ethan insisted, looking to his mother for confirmation. Abigail took a deep breath. He wasn't a student there, Ethan. He was a researcher. I was too. That's how we met. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. You worked at Harvard. As researchers. Both of you. Your father was brilliant, Dean Rivers said, self-taught in many ways, but with a mind that impressed even the most credentialed academics. He had a particular gift for translating complex, ethical frameworks into practical applications. I was helping him prepare his application to Harvard Law when I got pregnant. Abigail finished quietly. When we needed stability more than dreams, Ethan struggled to reconcile this new information with the story he'd always known. But why didn't you ever tell me? Abigail reached for his hand. I wanted you to find your own path, not chase your father's unfinished journey. And honestly, it hurt too much to talk about after he died. Those memories became both precious and painful. But the Harvard sweater in the photo, he earned that, Dean Rivers interjected. James was part of our community, even without formal student status. The work he did advanced our research significantly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mr. Langston stood in the doorway, still in his janitor's uniform, but somehow looking different, standing straighter, his eyes clear and direct. Gerald. Dean Rivers greeted him warmly. Please join us. Principal Hayes's eyebrows shot upward. You know our custodian. Know him. Dean Rivers laughed. Professor Gerald Langston was one of Harvard's most respected scholars in rhetorical theory before his early retirement. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the elderly janitor. Mr. Langston smiled slightly. Malcolm exaggerates. I was merely an associate professor, with unconventional teaching methods and a brilliant mind that the academic world lost too soon, Dean Rivers added. Ethan stared at his mentor in disbelief. You were a Harvard professor, all this time. Former professor. Mr. Langston corrected gently. Now just a janitor who recognizes potential when he sees it. Gerald contacted me after finding your early essays, Dean Rivers explained. He recognized something in your writing that reminded him of your father. I didn't make the connection immediately, but once I did, Mr. Langston admitted. I knew Malcolm needed to meet you. Principal Hayes looked completely lost. I'm sorry, but I'm having trouble following all this. The simplified version, Dean Rivers said, is that before his death, James Brooks inspired a scholarship program at Harvard, one designed specifically for talented students from underrepresented backgrounds. Ethan has unknowingly qualified for consideration, but there's more to the story, Abigail added, turning to her son. The letter I received was from Harvard Alumni Affairs. They've been looking for us for years. Apparently, your father's research formed the foundation for a major medical ethics framework now used in hospitals nationwide. There are royalties. Ethan's world was expanding and contracting simultaneously, too much information flooding in at once. So what does this all mean? It means, Dean Rivers said, that your Harvard dreams aren't as far-fetched as some might have suggested. But I want to be clear, you won't get special treatment in the application process. If anything, the committee will scrutinize your application more carefully because of these connections. I don't want special treatment, Ethan said firmly. I just want a fair chance. Dean Rivers nodded approvingly. That's precisely the attitude your father would have expected. Now, there's one more matter to address. He turned to Principal Hayes. It's come to my attention that some of Ethan's recommendation letters may have been misplaced. Principal Hayes's expression hardened. Misplaced. Several teachers attempted to submit recommendations for Ethan's preliminary Harvard application, but the submissions never arrived. When they inquired, they were told the matter had been handled appropriately. All eyes turned to the doorway, where Miss S. Grayson stood frozen, having arrived to check on her student, only to walk into the middle of this revelation. Miss S. Grayson, Principal Hayes said coldly, perhaps you can explain this administrative error. The English teacher's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. This is a serious matter that will require further investigation, Principal Hayes continued. but it can wait until after our meeting with Dean Rivers concludes. As Miss S. Grayson retreated from the doorway, Mr. Langston caught Ethan's eye. The old janitor professor gave him a slight nod that communicated volumes. This was just the beginning. As the meeting wound down, Dean Rivers handed Ethan a business card. The path ahead won't be easy. Harvard isn't just looking for academic excellence. We want students who can thrive in a challenging, sometimes adversarial environment. I understand, sir. No, Dean Rivers said with unexpected firmness. You don't not yet, but you will. He turned to Abigail. Your husband used to say that the true measure of potential isn't how high you can climb when the path is clear, but how you navigate when obstacles deliberately block your way. As Ethan and his mother left the office, they found Mr. Langston waiting in the hallway. Your father helped me too, he said quietly to Ethan. Before he was Harvard, he was just a good man. Remember that part of his legacy above all else. News of Dean Rivers's visit spread through Westwood High like wildfire, transforming Ethan's social standing overnight. Students who had previously ignored him now sought his attention. Teachers who had barely noticed him suddenly found his class contributions insightful. For Tyler and Noah, this unexpected reversal was intolerable. This is bullshit. Tyler fumed as they sat in his father's luxury SUV after school. Brooks isn't Harvard material. He's just a charity case. Noah scrolled through his phone. Apparently, his dad worked there or something. People are saying he's got connections. Connections. Tyler scoffed. His mom cleans toilets for a living. Hospital floors. Noah corrected absently, still focused on his phone. But check this out, I found her social media. He turned the screen toward Tyler. Look at her profile pic. The image showed Abigail in her hospital uniform, name badge clearly visible. So what? We already know she's a janitor. Yeah, but now we have proof and a shot of her workplace ID. Tyler's expression slowly transformed as understanding dawned, perfect for a little public education about Westwood's newest Harvard prospect. Within days, an anonymous post appeared on the school's unofficial social media page, a crudely edited image of Ethan wearing a Harvard sweatshirt, standing beside a mop bucket. The caption read, Harvard's newest charity case, like mother, like son. The post tagged dozens of students, ensuring maximum visibility. By morning, most of the school had seen it. Ethan discovered the post when he noticed the stares and whispers following him through the hallway. Mia showed him the image on her phone during lunch, her expression grim. This is low, even for them. She said, Are you okay? Ethan stared at the screen, a complicated mix of emotions churning inside him. The cruelty was expected, but something about the public mockery of his mother crossed a line he hadn't anticipated. I need to go, he said abruptly, gathering his things. Instead of attending his afternoon classes, Ethan took the bus home, arriving to find his mother unexpectedly there, sitting at the kitchen table with the Harvard letter and several old photo albums spread before her. Ethan, why aren't you at school? Abigail's surprise quickly transformed to concern when she saw his expression. What happened? He dropped his backpack and pulled out his phone, showing her the post without comment. Abigail studied it, her face revealing nothing. I see. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan's voice cracked slightly. About Dad, about Harvard, about everything. Abigail sighed deeply, gesturing for him to sit. It's complicated. Ethan, I'm 16, not 6. I can handle complicated. You're right. She closed the photo album and faced him directly. After your father died, I made choices, some good, some questionable in retrospect. I wanted you to build your own identity, not live in the shadow of what might have been. But you let me think Dad never went to college, that he was just some regular guy with a dream. He never did attend Harvard as a student. Abigail clarified. That part was true. He was a research assistant, brilliantly self-taught, but without formal credentials. Malcolm Dean Rivers saw his potential and created a position for him. And you work there too. I was a research coordinator. That's how we met. A soft smile touched her lips at the memory. Your father was designing an ethics framework for medical resource allocation in underserved communities. My job was to compile the data, organize his research. Ethan struggled to reconcile this new information with the mother he'd always known. So how did you end up cleaning floors at Mercy General? Pain flashed across Abigail's face. After James died, Everything fell apart. I couldn't stay at Harvard, too many memories. We moved back here to be near my mother before she passed. I took the hospital job because it had health benefits and flexible hours to raise you. But why hide it all from me? Let me believe we were just nobody. Oh, Ethan. Abigail reached for his hand. We were never nobody. And I didn't want you to think you needed connections or a fancy background to achieve great things. I wanted you to know that your path was your own to make. Would have been nice to know Dad was more than just a dream that never happened. Ethan said quietly. He was so much more. Abigail agreed. And I should have shared that with you sooner. I just didn't want you to feel pressure to fulfill his legacy. The conversation continued into the evening. Pieces of family history finally coming into focus. James Brooks had been a community college dropout who taught himself advanced bioethics through library books and free online courses. His natural brilliance had caught Dean Rivers's attention during a public lecture, where James had asked questions that challenged the speaker's fundamental assumptions. Malcolm took him under his wing, Abigail explained, created opportunities that the traditional system wouldn't have allowed. Your father was going to be Malcolm's great experiment, proving that Harvard needed to look beyond conventional credentials to find true excellence. Until I came along, Ethan said. Until you came along, Abigail agreed, and became his new priority. He never regretted that choice. Ethan not for a second. The next morning, Ethan returned to school with a new resolve. The whispers and stares continued, but they seemed to slide off him now, inconsequential in the larger context of his journey. At his locker, he found Mia waiting. You disappeared yesterday, she said. I was worried. Had some family history to sort out, he replied. But I'm good now, better, odd actually. Mia studied him curiously. You seem different. I am. He closed his locker with newfound determination. I'm done letting other people define me. Over the following weeks, Ethan focused with renewed intensity on his Harvard application. Dean Rivers had made it clear there would be no favors, no special treatment. If anything, the connection to his father meant his application would face even greater scrutiny. Meanwhile, Miss S. Grayson's position grew increasingly precarious as an investigation into the suppressed recommendation letters proceeded. She avoided eye contact with Ethan in class. Her earlier condescension replaced by a strained neutrality. One afternoon, Dean Rivers called with an unexpected opportunity. We're running a weekend mentorship program for prospective applicants, he explained. Normally, it's by invitation only, but I'd like you to participate. Ethan accepted immediately, only later learning what he'd signed up for an intensive series of seminars, debates, and writing workshops held at Brenner Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in the state. His first Saturday, there was a stark education in privilege. The campus resembled a small liberal arts college, more than a high school, with manicured grounds and buildings named after donors. Students arrived in luxury cars, dressed in casual but clearly expensive clothes, exuding the confidence of those who had never questioned their belonging in such spaces. Ethan, in his best jeans and button-down shirt, felt the familiar weight of being an outsider. The registration table attendant checked his name twice, her skepticism poorly concealed. You're in Group C Phillips Auditorium, she finally said, handing him a packet. The day's structure became clear, quickly rotating sessions where students engaged in structured debates, analytical writing exercises, and problem-solving scenarios. In his first group discussion, the topic was ethical dimensions of artificial intelligence in healthcare. The students around him confidently referenced research papers and dropped names of professors they'd met. Ethan remained silent, absorbing the conversation dynamics. You've been quiet, the faculty facilitator noted, turning attention to him. Do you have thoughts to share, Mr. Brooks? All eyes turned to him, expressions ranging from curious to dismissive. I'm noticing a pattern in our discussion, Ethan began carefully. We're approaching AI ethics from the perspective of hospital administrators and physicians. But there's another stakeholder group we haven't considered, which is, the facilitator prompted, custodial and support staff, Ethan said. The people who clean patient rooms, transport specimens, maintain equipment. AI implementation affects their job security and working conditions, but they're rarely consulted in the ethical frameworks. A few students exchanged glances, some smirking slightly. That's an unexpected perspective. The facilitator acknowledged. Can you elaborate? Drawing on his mother's hospital experiences and his father's research, which he'd been studying since Dean Rivers's visit, Ethan outlined how ethical AI implementation needed to consider its impact across all levels of the healthcare hierarchy. By the session's end, the initial smirks had faded. The facilitator made a note on his evaluation sheet, nodding thoughtfully. Similar scenes played out across the day's sessions. Ethan's contributions were infrequent but substantive, offering perspectives that the other students' privileged backgrounds hadn't considered. During lunch, he sat alone until someone unexpectedly placed their tray across from him. Mind if I join you? Ethan looked up to find a girl he recognized from one of the morning sessions, Taylor Roberts from Brenner Academy. According to her name tag. Go ahead, he said, surprised. Your point about AI impact on support staff was smart, she said without preamble. My dad always says a good leader considers how decisions affect everyone, not just the people in the boardroom. Sounds like a wise man. Fortune 500 CEO, she replied with casual confidence that wasn't quite bragging. But honestly, I was getting tired of hearing James talk about his summer internship at MIT again. You changed the conversation in a good way. As they talked, Ethan gradually realized that not everyone in this privileged world was an adversary. Some, like Taylor, genuinely valued different perspectives. Still, the weekend was emotionally exhausting, constantly navigating microaggressions, proving and reproving his intellectual worth. By Sunday afternoon, Ethan felt drained, but also strangely empowered. He could hold his own in these spaces. He belonged in the conversation. As the program concluded, Dean Rivers approached him. Challenging weekend, he asked, clearly aware of the dynamics at play. Ethan nodded. Educational. Harvard isn't always a welcoming place, Dean Rivers said frankly. Some doors will open for you, but others you'll need to push through yourself. The question is whether you're prepared for that fight. I am. Dean Rivers studied him thoughtfully. Your father's journal might help. I believe Gerald Mr. Langston has it now. The mention of a journal sparked immediate interest. My father kept a journal. He did quite insightful about navigating spaces that weren't designed with him in mind. The following Monday, Mr. Langston presented Ethan with a worn, leather-bound book. I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this. I think the time has come. Ethan opened it carefully, finding pages filled with his father's handwriting observations, strategies, reflections on institutional barriers, and how to overcome them. One passage stood out immediately. Your dreams will scare small minds. Let them be scared. That same afternoon, Miss S. Grayson was called to the district office regarding the suppressed recommendation investigation. Her absence created a ripple effect of speculation throughout the school. After the final bell, Ethan found her waiting beside his locker, her composed facade cracking around the edges. We need to talk, she said quietly. Ethan regarded her warily. About what? Your mother, Miss S. Grayson glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. I knew her at Harvard. The revelation was unexpected. You worked at Harvard. I was a graduate student when your parents were there. Her voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Your father received opportunities that many of us had worked years to earn: special mentorship, research positions, access to faculty that graduate students couldn't get. Understanding dawned slowly. You were jealous of him. It wasn't just jealousy, she insisted. It was about fairness, about process. Some of us followed all the rules, checked every box, only to watch an untrained outsider receive recognition we'd earned. So when you saw me writing about Harvard, it brought everything back. Her shoulders slumped slightly. I'm not proud of how I've handled this, Ethan. The board has placed me on administrative leave pending review. Ethan absorbed this information silently, unsure how to respond. For what it's worth, Miss S. Grayson added, your writing is exceptional, better than I wanted to admit. Before Ethan could reply, they were interrupted by sudden shouting from the main hallway. They turned to find Abigail Brooks confronting Tyler's father, Douglas Evans, president of the school board and CEO of a regional insurance company. Your son created that disgusting post about my family, Abigail was saying, her voice controlled but intense. I want it taken down and a public apology issued. Mr. Evans towered over her, his expensive suit and commanding presence designed to intimidate. Boys will be boys, Miss S. Brooks. Perhaps if you're concerned about your son's reputation, You should focus on his unrealistic aspirations rather than harmless jokes. There's nothing harmless about public humiliation, Abigail replied, and nothing unrealistic about my son's potential. Students gathered to watch the confrontation, phones recording the exchange. Ethan pushed through the crowd, heart pounding at the sight of his mother standing her ground against such powerful opposition. "Mom," he called out, moving to her side. Mr. Evans turned his attention to Ethan, looking him up and down with thinly veiled contempt. "Ah, Harvard's newest prospect. Tell me, boy, do you really think you belong at an institution where tuition costs more than your mother makes in a year?" The hallway fell silent, the cruelty of the question hanging in the air. Ethan met the man's gaze steadily, his father's journal words echoing in his mind. "With all due respect, sir, Harvard doesn't need another wealthy student buying their way in. What they need is someone who will actually contribute something original to the conversation." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Mr. Evans's face darkened with anger. "You'll regret that disrespect, young man. I have considerable influence in this district, and I have truth on my side," Ethan replied calmly, "which seems in short supply around here lately," as Mr. Evans stormed away, threatening vague consequences. Abigail squeezed Ethan's hand. "Your father would be so proud of you right now." That evening, as video of the confrontation circulated online, a citywide Harvard-sponsored essay competition announced its winner, Ethan Brooks of Westwood High School. The timing was coincidental but perfect, a public validation, just when the forces aligned against him had reached their peak. For Tyler, watching his carefully constructed social hierarchy crumble as his rival succeeded despite his best efforts, the humiliation was absolute. What neither of them realized was that the real battle had only just begun. Rain pelted against the windows of Westwood High's administration building as Douglas Evans strode purposefully down the hallway, his expensive leather shoes squeaking against the recently mopped floor. Behind him trailed Miss S. Grayson, her face a mask of grim determination, despite her precarious professional standing. Inside the conference room, Principal Hayes and 3 school board members sat arrayed at a long table, their expressions varying from discomfort to outright hostility. At the end of the table sat Ethan, alone but upright, his father's journal tucked in his backpack beside him. "Let the record show," Mr. Evans began, without preamble, "that this hearing concerns serious allegations of code of conduct violations by student Ethan Brooks." Principal Hayes's brow furrowed. "Mr. Evans, I must remind you that your position as board president doesn't grant you authority to personally preside over disciplinary matters, especially given your conflict of interest." "I have recused myself from voting," Evans replied smoothly. "But as the complainant, I have every right to present evidence." He turned to Ethan. "Your recent behavior has been increasingly disruptive to the educational environment of this school." "Disruptive?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. Evans placed a folder on the table. "Public confrontation with a school board official. Intimidation of fellow students. Suspicious timing of academic achievements." "That's absurd," Ethan responded, fighting to keep his tone respectful. Miss S. Grayson stepped forward. "Mr. Evans has compiled evidence suggesting Mr. Brooks's Harvard interview should be postponed, pending a full investigation into his conduct." Principal Hayes's patience visibly thinned. This meeting was called with less than 24 hours' notice. The student has no representation, no parent present. "I'm here." Abigail Brooks's voice cut through the tension as she entered the room, still wearing her hospital uniform. "Sorry I'm late. Some of us don't have the luxury of rearranging our work schedules on a moment's notice." Behind her stood Mr. Langston, and to everyone's surprise, Dean Malcolm Rivers. "Dean Rivers," Mr. Evans faltered momentarily. "This is an internal school matter, which directly impacts a Harvard candidate." The dean replied smoothly. "As the institutional representative overseeing Mr. Brooks's application process, I have a vested interest in these proceedings." Evans recovered quickly. "Then you should be particularly concerned about the character issues at hand." "Which are?" Dean Rivers prompted. "Mr. Brooks has exhibited a pattern of disrespect toward authority figures, manipulated faculty for preferential treatment, and most recently publicly humiliated my son Tyler with his essay victory." A strange silence fell over the room. Finally, Principal Hayes spoke, his voice heavy with disbelief. Let me understand correctly. You're alleging that Ethan Brooks's academic achievement constitutes harassment of your son. The timing and manner were clearly designed to embarrass. Principal Hayes held up his hand, silencing Evans mid-sentence. For 3 years, I've maintained a policy of non-intervention in student matters whenever possible. I believed students should resolve their own conflicts. He turned to Ethan. That was a mistake, and one for which I owe you an apology. The unexpectedness of this statement left everyone momentarily speechless. Since Mr. Evans has opened this door, Principal Hayes continued, pulling out a tablet. Perhaps we should review the complete history of interactions between Ethan and Tyler Evans. He tapped the screen. I've compiled security footage, social media posts, and teacher reports documenting a systematic campaign of harassment against Mr. Brooks. He turned the tablet to display a collection of screenshots, the doctored image mocking Ethan's mother, text messages planning the essay sabotage, and other evidence of Tyler's bullying. This meeting is adjourned, Principal Hayes declared firmly. And, Mr. Evans, I suggest you consider your position carefully before pursuing this further. The district has a zero-tolerance policy for bullying that applies to everyone, even board presidents' children. Evans's face flushed. This isn't over, he snapped, gathering his papers. Actually, Dean Rivers interjected. I believe it is. He passed a document to Evans. This letter from Harvard's general counsel indicates our serious concern about potential interference in our admissions process. The university takes a dim view of attempts to improperly influence candidate evaluations. Evans scanned the document, his expression darkening further. Before he stormed from the room, Miss S. Grayson lingered, her eyes meeting Ethan's briefly before she too departed, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As the room cleared, Abigail embraced her son. You okay? Ethan nodded, still processing what had just occurred. I didn't know Principal Hayes was collecting evidence all this time. Sometimes, Mr. Langston said quietly, those who seem indifferent are simply gathering their strength for the right moment. Dean Rivers checked his watch. Now that this unpleasantness is behind us, we should discuss your Harvard interview. It's still scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow. Ethan's eyes widened. The confrontation with Evans had pushed everything else from his mind. 4:00, Harvard Club downtown. Dean Rivers handed him a card with the address. This is your final formal assessment. Be prepared for challenging questions from alumni, professors, and community leaders. I'll be ready, Ethan promised, though doubt flickered at the edges of his confidence.